So, welcome to another episode of a Nefs podcast with me, Rida Alwan.
And me, Naba Madani.
Today we have an author, a scriptwriter, and a person that's talking about Judeo-Arabic. And it's been a phenomenal. We've gone through her book.
That's amazing. I just don't know where to start.
So,
I mean, I can start from whatever, but you know what? I think the only way we give it justice is if we introduce Samantha.
are we going to be introducing as Samantha Elias or Ellis?
Well, let's see what she thinks. Welcome, Samantha.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's really nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Yes, especially with the launch of your new book. You must be so busy.
It is quite, it's been a really nice response. I've had really nice messages from also Iraqis from all over the world. It's really, well, I mean, I know the community is like that, but, to get these emails and things, it's just been lovely. It's been really, people finding you on Instagram and
Well deserved,
really nice.
honestly.
Congratulations. I mean, it has been a very good book in the sense that Judeo-Arabic, I mean, there are certain...
Judeo-Arabic, Judeo-Iraqi Arabic.
Judeo-Iraqi Arabic, exactly. And it's like there are so many words that are in common that we use, as in this is Iraqi for us. It's nothing to do with Judeo. It's got nothing to do with Islam. It's just Iraqi.
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 Yeah.
But I think the thing is, everyone was talking to everyone else for
And that's
thousands of years.
100%.
So there's borrowing backwards and forwards.
Yes.
And I think, I mean, I'm not a linguist. I didn't go into this as a linguist. I went into this as a second generation Iraqi Jew. My parents came here. My father left Iraq in 1951, went to Israel in the mass airlift, and my mother left in 71 and came here. I don't speak it. I'm going to apologise in advance for my accent if I do say the odd word, because it will make anyone who speaks Arabic really cringe. I'm so sorry. But that's the second generation story. A lot of us don't speak it. But I went into it because the Jewish dialect or language is dying out. It's going extinct. There are actually, when I wrote the book, I said there are only 3 Jews left in Iraq. Someone told me the other day there's only 1 now. So I don't know if that's true. Somewhere between 3 and 1 is probably the answer. I'm not sure. But there is no community. We're not going back. We're not going back to live, certainly. And the language is dying, and I wanted to know more about it before it went. So, yeah, I'm not a linguist, but what
you
I
do understand it from what
I do understand, yeah.
Because your mother still speaks it.
My parents still speak it to each other and to us a bit. All my family still speak it, that generation. My generation don't. And I have a child and he knows a few words, but he's not going to speak it probably.
I think it's like any culture, any country that comes to the UK, that's one of the biggest struggles.
Yes.
That is trying to keep your language.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that as Iraqis that have come to the UK from the 60s, 50s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and that's one of the biggest struggles that we have with our kids.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah.
It's trying to keep our language, our culture, our what's the word I'm looking for? I was going to say habits, but it's not habits. It's traditions.
Yes.
With how we talk, how we act, and what we do, and keeping those bring them alive. Yeah.
Well, I was very interested in what we can keep and what we can't. Someone told me last night that Claudia Roden said that the last thing to go is the food. So generations after people have left a place, they're still cooking the recipes, and I thought that's very truthful. Actually, I'd never heard that before, but it makes sense because you might know none of the words, you might have lost the traditions, you might have forgotten the stories, but if a recipe is written down, you can follow it, or if you get it from someone else, you can follow it and you can know what your ancestors were cooking and what they were eating and how it felt to, make the dough in your hands and roll. There's I always think Iraqi food in general and Iraqi Jewish food as well is a lot of rolling. It's very tactile. You don't it's not a put things on the stove and leave it kind of situation. Unfortunately, sometimes you wish it was, but it's very, so you're doing what your ancestors were doing. So I get that with the food. But I mean, again, I found some foods were not. Some food culture was not portable. So I know you also know Laith El-Zubaydi, who has, I must say, he has a play coming on at the Bush. We should all go and see it. But anyway, he and I talked a lot about how I really wanted to taste nabuk, the fruit, which I just had never, which is, I think you were telling me, weren't you, that it's very hard to transport.
Because it goes off very quickly.
It goes off quickly.
It goes off very quickly.
So I never had it, and my parents they talked about it all. My grandmother said it's like chocolate. Everyone has it in their garden. There's loads on every street. Anyway, I was really desperate to try it, and he brought me like a small punnet of them from Iraq, and we passed it around the whole family. It was such a beautiful thing for him to do. His first time to Iraq, and he remembered to bring it for me. But that's the kind of thing, I mean, I completely failed to pass on a taste for it to my son because he refused to eat it. He said he wanted a Haribo. But if he had had it and it was his favourite thing, I couldn't have said to him, no problem, I'll get you some more.
But you can actually get it here. So there are a few supermarkets that import it. Yeah, they do import it in. And I remember there's a tongue twister, nabug nabug nahsa min nabug nabukum. And it was just it's just this, I don't know why, just when you said nabug, it just came into my head. Yeah, it's just like this little tongue twister that we used to have because my parents were always talking about nabug, and it's only until the last 10 years or so that we started seeing it here on the streets.
Yeah, I mean, we never saw it growing up.
Yeah,
and I mean, it's not there all. It's not like it's there all the time.
So what's your favorite Iraqi dish then?
Well, I love tabit. Obviously, that's probably the one food that I would associate more with the Jewish community because it was developed to be cooked overnight. When you couldn't use the oven or a fire overnight on Shabbat, and it's the chicken and rice. I love that. Can't make it. I mean.
I'm sure you can.
I've not made it successfully, not like my mum makes it. I love kubba shwanda. Do you have that as well? The beetroot kubba. And what else do I like? I like makhbouz, which some people call baba tama, the dates.
Kleche.
Okay.
Kleche. We call it kleche.
You call it kleche. Okay, so with the dates, and I love that. I make that quite a lot, actually. That's an relatively easy one. They're all very labour intensive.
They are, yeah.
But that's the one I always have, a bag or two in the freezer.
Do you find it very therapeutic?
Yeah, that one in particular, when you make the balls and you stuff the balls with the balls and you're kind of rolling, it's very, it's quite...
We usually make a fa'id.
Okay, yes.
But yeah, I mean, it's always, I don't know, most Iraqi household will always have it because they'll have it with their tea.
Yes, yeah.
So the afternoon thing, like an afternoon tea, you'll have to have your chai and your kleche or makhbouz.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, the Lebanese have it ma'moul.
Ma'moul.
Yeah, which is delicious, of course.
As well, yeah.
But I think with Iraqis, it's mainly stuffed with dates or walnuts. And there's coconuts as well, I think.
Yeah, we do a cheese one as well with in the half moons, the crescent moon shape, which is gorgeous. But the date one is my favourite. It is very good with tea.
Now.
I know. We should have brought some with us.
Talking about recipes, Samantha, your book. I mean, this is what you've done amazing in this book, and I think if I would ever think about writing a book, I'd go obviously not as eloquent as you have written your book, but I would use recipes to express a lot of my culture, a lot of my upbringing.
Yeah.
And I think you've done that so beautifully in this book as well. Just bring in these recipes. It's so nice because we found out that the first cookbook was actually Sumerian, right?
Yeah.
And how many thousands of years is that? And so like you were saying earlier, recipes will always be passed on.
Yeah.
And it leaves a stamp.
And there is a connection as well. I was a 10th century Iraqi cookbook that was, I can't remember the name of the writer of it. Anyway, it was a cookbook with also medical remedies. So it was like recipes just that you might like to eat, but also this one might also cure you if you have a fever, and it was translated, I think, by the 11th century. It was translated into Latin, and then it spread all over Europe. And that's one of the reasons that, possibly that is how it came. But that, a lot of the very English foods, what we think of as the most quintessentially English foods, mince pies, brown sauce, Christmas pudding, they have these spices from the Middle East in them, because there was these recipes were circulating and they were travelling. And this is, the 11th century, this is a very long time ago. They were travelling across Europe. And, I think we tend to think of the cultures as much more separate than they are, but there's been a conversation going on a very long time. I don't know, that made me feel a bit less disconnected to find that out.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, God, where do you want to go with the book? Shall we take a part of this book? Shall we read this book? No, I don't want to do that. I want you to tell us a bit more about this book.
Tell us more about your journey. So when your earlier life and how it started and how you felt being Iraqi or you never felt being Iraqi.
Sure. Yeah. Like you probably, I've had quite a journey with it. I'm second generation, so obviously that's a different. Because my mother's family had left in 1971, which is actually quite late. There were not that many Jews in Iraq by 1971. I was born in 75, so it was very recent for us. Everyone was speaking Arabic all the time, and I just remember, being at my grandmother's house and this sort of a cloud of smoke. Everyone was smoking like mad, talking like mad, and they were all talking about Baghdad all the time. I really felt that it was more real to me than London as a small child, and the stories were very important to me. And when I was very small, I thought that English was just a kind of kid's language, and it was, a sort of like for picture books, not really, and I just thought naturally when I was grown up, I would be speaking, the language my parents were speaking. I just thought it would happen. And then all grown-ups, and I went to school and I realised they were grown-ups who spoke English as well. But, it was a little kind of journey for me as a very small child. And I felt very connected and very sort of safe in it. And then maybe inevitably, as I got older at school, I sort of wanted to fit in. I also felt there was a lot of pressure in my community to be a certain way, live a certain way. It's a lot more open and sort of capacious as a community now, but it was quite conventional at the time. We were all recent immigrants, recent refugees, and it was a different experience. And I felt quite a lot of pressure to be a certain way, and I didn't want that. So I started sort of pulling away. I ended up going to study English literature. It was at Cambridge, the most English kind of thing you could do. It felt very, very sort of disconnected. And I wasn't cooking the food. I remember my parents bought me a rice cooker to take to university, like the essential item. I don't think I even had a kettle before the rice cooker came first. And, it was really important. And I just didn't use it because I felt like, who am I to cook Iraqi food? Who am I to, I wasn't born here. I don't speak the language. Here I am studying Chaucer in this place. What am I doing? Just
because you said Cambridge, I remember, I don't know who told me this, and this was information I've read. And Cambridge and university initially started, when they started as universities, teaching in Arabic. They had to speak Arabic because a lot of books were in Arabic, especially like algorithms and maths and numbers and letters and science. There was quite a lot of books in Arabic, so it was a prerequisite that the teachers had to be able to speak Arabic. We're talking about hundreds
in the Middle
of years,
Ages, and there were, there was an Arabic department. There were Jewish languages taught as well. This was all possible, but in the 90s, studying English literature there, it did not feel, I did not fit in. I did not feel I fitted in, and I wanted to fit in. And I felt very disconnected. Came back to London, moved out, and I was living with a friend. And it was the food that got me back in. I sort of started cooking it, and I just felt like I'd plugged back in into the socket or something. I just felt okay. And for me, it was also like, I didn't have to think too much. My hands are taking over. My hands know what they're doing somehow because, I used to cook with my mum. And I just felt reconnected. It was, and it went from there.
You said your grandmother was also here.
Yes, my grandmother, she died last October, but she was 95,
sorry.
thank you. But, I was very lucky to have her that long in my life and to live to such an old age. And yes, so, she would never have described herself this way, but she was a great storyteller. Like, she could really make you go back to where she wanted you to go with when she talked about things. So yeah, and it was it was a big noisy family and whatever, but it was probably very similar to your families. It felt very Iraqi. But with I've written all sorts of other different things, and I have talked about being Iraqi and being Jewish and being Iraqi Jewish before, and I have and I also find it's been very difficult because often I worked as a playwright for a lot of my career, and you'd say, this character's gonna be Iraqi Jewish, and people would go, why? Why do they have to be? And why is the default that they have to be white British, vaguely C of E? Like why is that the default? Why can't the default be something I actually know how to write? But also I used to encounter this, do you mean one parent's Iraqi and one's Jewish? And I would say, well, why is the default that Iraqi can't be Jewish? Iraqi, there are a lot of different, so many different communities come from Iraq. So I found that very difficult. Anyway, sorry, I'm going to this book came out of having a child, really, and realising I can't pass. There's so much I can't pass on, and particularly the language, and that's where I started thinking I wanted to really delve into it deeper, know more about what I was losing before it was completely gone.
I think in the beginning of the book you say you started at about 2000, just during COVID, where you started doing your research.
Yeah, well, actually, I started before COVID. It's been such a long haul, this book. I haven't been writing it the whole time. I have done some other things. I think it was 2019, and I was in a playground with my son.
Yeah.
He's now 8. He was 2 at the time, so it's a really long time ago. And he got playing with this little French kid, and the mum was speaking to the child in French and English, and I said, "Oh, which nursery?" You talk to another parent in the playground, and she said, "Oh, he goes to the bilingual nursery down the road." And I said, "Oh, I really wanted to send my son there. I wanted him to be bilingual because I grew up in a bilingual house." And she said, "But you're not French." And I said, no. But she said, "Why don't you send him to a nursery for your language?" And I said, "Oh, because my language is dead." And then I burst into tears, and it was awful. I couldn't go to that playground for ages because I really it's a complete stranger. I burst into floods of tears. My son was, going, "What's going on?" I sort of took him home, and then when I got home, I started really going, "How much of it is lost? Is it lost?" And it was very difficult to. It's difficult to find. It was difficult at the time to find much solid. There's a bit more now. It's difficult to find much solid information about it.
Yeah.
Because it's mainly an oral language. When Iraqi Jews write books when they wrote books in Iraq, they would write them in classical Arabic.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when most of the Jews of Iraq left in 1951. So they were then writing wherever they ended up, Hebrew, English, French, wherever they ended up.
That's true.
And since then, obviously, that trend has continued. So there's very few books. There's hardly anything written in Judeo-Iraqi Arabic, and it was always seen as a bit secondary,
Is it something that might be able to be revived?
The language, well, I'm quite pessimistic because what I was told by linguists was it doesn't matter how many speakers there are if they're all in one generation and they're not passing it on. You can have 1 billion speakers in one generation. If their kids are not learning it, then
like any language, I guess.
Any language can go in one generation. And because most of the Jews left in 51, we're now in the 3rd and 4th generation. Yeah. For many people, it's very unusual to be as old as me and to have speakers for parents. There are very few of us, and most of us are not passing. My parents, it was quite. It was not. It was the decision was made that it was going extinct. That we were here now. That we had. My mother in particular, her family had a very, very difficult time leaving Iraq, and they missed it like crazy, but they didn't feel an urge to go back in the 70s. They had it had taken them years to get out. They'd had a very, very difficult time, and they were sort of trying to forget it for their own good, because they knew that if they went again, they wouldn't be able to get out again. It was.
There's a picture here that you. Which one is it? It's this one here.
Oh yes. So that's
is
my grandmother with the neck scarf, and next to her, is Salima Murad, Salima Pasha, and then on the other side is Nadim al-Razali, her husband. I'm sure everyone listening to this knows who they are. The amazing singers.
Your grandfather was a doctor for them.
My grandfather was a GP, and he used to see Nadim al-Razali, and he used to see him at home. I guess partly maybe he's a celebrity. It's a bit difficult for him to go to a GP surgery, and so they used to come to the house, and my mother remembers them coming to the house as well, and Salima one day singing for her. I mean, it must have been amazing.
It must have been. My God, I think anyone listening right now is so jealous.
I know, I'm jealous. Actually, when my grandmother, in her last couple of days, we played her some of from YouTube singing, and it felt really nice thing to do. I hope she could hear it. So yeah, and
there's this other picture which is a really old picture.
This is a bit of this is not great quality, this picture, but the woman holding the baby is my grandmother, and she's holding my uncle, and then there are 3 other generations of her family. So her mum, her grandmother, her great grandmother. This is in Baghdad, and I think it's interesting. Even the clothes they're wearing look like, from one end of that hammock to the other, you can see a sort of almost a century of fashion, from the quite, much more traditional sort of outfit that her great grandmother, was wearing. But 5 generations on the one hammock.
Wow, that's fantastic.
You didn't include any of these pictures in the book, I noticed.
It's the publisher decides that.
I
did provide them, but I think it's quite expensive to print pictures. So
okay.
I think that's why I'd like to have included some photographs.
Well, we're including them today.
Yeah, there you go.
So now, going back to the book again, chopping onions on my heart.
Yes. Do you use this phrase? I'm going to mispronounce it now. Sorry. Yithram basal al rasafadi. It's actually chopping onions on the top of my heart.
Yithram basal.
Yeah. You see, now you're saying it better than me. Al ras on the top.
Al ras.
On the afadi.
Ras galbi.
Well, we use galbi as well, but afadi is a different word for heart in the Jewish dialect. I think in the Jewish dialect, although I should say
Fadi,
yeah. So, but also, I mean,
Fadi.
I don't think I've not heard that phrase.
I've not heard it as well.
So my family.
There's a lot of phrases in the book that I have heard.
Yes.
I mean, I think you talk about fidwa quite a bit.
We all say fidwa.
Yeah. That's brilliant. What was I going to say with the it's like rubbing salt in the wound.
Okay.
So, but it's much more intense than rubbing salt in the wound.
Yeah.
I mean, I think probably all the Iraqi dialects are quite intense compared to, So that would be a sort of phrase. I meant to say instead of the Jewish accent and a lot of the words sound very similar to the Maslawi
that's very
Arabic.
That's very true. Yes.
So if any of your listeners or you, so I think it's very similar. What I was told was different. What the difference is that. Because the Jews first arrived in Iraq, and we have to go back to 597 BCE when Nebuchadnezzar brought the Jews over, and he brought the Jews over and as sort of captive labour originally, and they were speaking Hebrew when they arrived. They came from the Jewish kingdoms and they came over, and they quickly switched to Aramaic. That's the local language, and they switched to it, and then they developed their own variant, which was Jewish Babylonian Aramaic, which had a lot of Hebrew in it, and that's what they wrote the Babylonian Talmud in, which is still read today. And then, of course, with the Arab conquest, everyone switches to Arabic, including the Jews who are still there, centuries on from when they came. So everyone switches to Arabic. But the Jewish community retained a lot of the Aramaic and Hebrew constructions.
Because of their religious books, at the end of the day, their religious books were
the religious books were in that, but just because that's what they'd been speaking. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, who knows why they retained it, but or maybe just to keep because the community was keeping a little separation. I don't know. People there was a lot of back and forth, but the communities were also had their own traditions. So even the grammar, there's a lot of it that is carried over from Aramaic. And when I was trying to study my language, again, the last couple of years, it was very frustrating because sometimes they'd say this really annoying archaic grammar construction. All other Arabic has got rid of it, but we're hanging on to it. And I'd be like, oh my goodness. I mean, thanks, guys. You've made my life a lot harder. And now I have to get to grips with it. So that's, and then of course the accent, which you could always tell if someone was speaking. But all my family here in Iraq would also speak to their neighbours, their friends. They would do their schooling, their business, their work. In traditional Iraqi Arabic, so they would be speaking both. So there was a lot of backwards and forwards.
I mean, even in Iraq itself, the north and the south, they have some
words we are just not
familiar with. We're not familiar with because it's just sort of their local language, and I think. Even when we go back to Iraq, people tell us, "Oh, you're speaking old Iraqi."
Yes, of course, it will change.
Yeah, so there are new words that are coming in that we're not even aware of because we're living vicariously through our parents as well.
Of course, yeah.
So
I mean, think about it here. I don't understand the younger generation myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're already outdated even in English.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So languages do evolve, I guess, over time.
Of course.
But the mixture, I mean, I'm sure. Even the Iraqi Arabic have picked up some of the Hebrew or Aramaic words. And it's been a mixture. And this is what's beautiful about Iraq, and people don't seem to understand this. It's because we were so diverse.
Yes.
We take bits from everybody in every community. Yeah. And it's really important to bring that back, to bridge those gaps again, because we are all one community at the end of the day. And it's really, really important for all of us, I think, and for our kids, because we've got kids, right?
Yeah.
We want to build that bridge for our kids as well and bring all these communities together.
Yeah. I mean my son identifies very strongly as Iraqi, even though, it's his grandparents and it's only on one side, but he will tell you, So, I mean, presumably your kids...
our kids...
And do you speak Arabic at home?
Yeah, so that's a discussion we were having off screen earlier. Yeah. It's something that we're pushing so hard with our kids. I mean, we've now got a money pot. It's like, if you speak Arabic, there'll be treats towards it as well. But the thing
I want to come to your house. That's what's going to finally unlock the language for me. I'm coming to stay.
It's so easy to lose the language. It is so easy to lose.
It's so easy.
I've got so many friends, who were here in the early 80s and the late 70s, where their kids only understand Arabic and can't speak it.
Yeah, like me.
Yeah, so it's a shame, Why are we losing our language?
Yeah.
And it's about bringing it back, and then what can we do to motivate it to come back, if that makes sense.
But I think with your Arabic, it's still going. Whereas what I have is we don't have the connection. We don't have the community there anymore, and so it's.
I think, like in your book as written, there was a lot of stigma to speaking it as well, wasn't there?
Yes. So the Iraqi Jews who went to Israel, like the Yiddish speakers who went to Israel, everyone switched to Hebrew, and there was a lot of pressure to not speak. But I think because of the political situation from the very start, there was always this feeling that Arabic was not a language that you should be speaking at. So there was a lot of stigma, which is a real shame. Yeah. And it's a shame for the Yiddish speakers as well, but there was a huge Yiddish literature, and that has really kept it going. And there were always more Yiddish speakers than there were speakers of Judeo-Arabic as well. So there's, that's the difference there.
No, but what do you do to try and keep Arabic alive in your language?
Oh God, I'm terrible at this. I'm too soft with my kids. I am. I mean, I tried my parents used to do this thing, is like, if you take off your shoes, you take off English at home.
Oh, wow.
And when it didn't work, there's a lot of us, me and my siblings would go into the room and start speaking English. It was always easier. And I see that happening with my boys as well. They can't, I mean, the older one's better than the younger one. I think the younger one refuses to speak Arabic. He understands everything, but he refuses to speak Arabic.
I got asked the question once, what language do you dream in?
Oh, yeah.
because they're like, if you're still dreaming in Arabic, then you haven't lost it. And I was like, interesting.
And what language do you both dream in?
English, definitely.
Depends on what I'm dreaming about.
But when I was very young, I used to dream in Arabic. I used to, not all the time, but I used to sometimes have these dreams, and I mean, I don't know. In the dreams, I was fluent. I mean, that's probably not true, but you know, I was speaking, and I was, you know, I used to dream I was in Iraq all the time, and it felt very real to me. You know, the idea of going there, but I haven't had one of those. I would like to have one of those again, hopefully one day. But yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, it was an interesting question because I was like, oh, that's a very. It's like I can't remember a dream now, and it's just like you start itching your head like, when did I last dream? Because there are so many dreams you wake up like, I had a dream, but I can't remember what it was about.
Yeah.
And it's just it's so interesting. It's like, what language do you dream in? And I was like, oh, that's a very good question. I've never actually paid attention to it, and it's like, okay. And then I started paying attention to it, and I was like, okay. So when I was in my dreams, when I spoke to older people like my grandparents or my parents, it would be in Arabic, and when it was with my friends, it was just English, and it was just like, okay. And then it was like, okay, now I'm at a point where, I mean, I remember when we were younger, and so many of my friends did, our parents wanted to learn English, so we were speaking English at home. So just to get them into the flow, we were translating letters. I think we had this conversation with Khayyam, where he talked about translating for his mother.
Yes,
and,
it's very moving when he talked about that.
Yeah, and it's just sort of okay, we've gone through all of this, and I think we had a person that I've spoken to, and he goes, I was going into medical situations with my parents that were way above my comprehension and understanding, and I was translating to doctors. Yeah, and he was like, the doctors were telling me things. I was like, I don't know how to translate this, and it's just that's part of that language mixture of what do I speak, how do I speak, what do I do, and the frustration of not knowing our language. And I think that's something that I believe that we have revived in a way. I mean, there are so many languages, and you know, fingers crossed one day we'll do this podcast in Arabic.
Samantha, you're coming on.
Yeah, I'm coming back.
But I mean, me and Naba have discussed it. It's like, okay, it's difficult for us to have a full conversation. There are so many words that we still don't know, especially medical terms or
a lot of terminologies,
technical terms that we still need to learn.
Yeah, I mean, you know the Arabic that's spoken in your home, you know, but not in the wider world. We're not being taught at school in it, you know. But I mean, one thing that is for my language dialect, I should say, by the way, some people call it language, some people call it a dialect, and I'm going backwards and forwards. And there's a joke that was made actually about Yiddish. It's not a very funny joke because it was made in 1945 when, you know, most of the Yiddish speakers had been killed. But I think half the world's Yiddish speakers were killed in the Holocaust. But this joke was made that a language is just a dialect with an army. And, you know, so there's not, linguistically, there's not a difference. It's to do with how powerful it's seen to be, or how much value is placed on it, or how hard people are able to fight for it. But what I was going to say is that there's Oxford University have this Oxford School of Rare Jewish Languages, and they teach languages none of us have heard of. I mean, it's extraordinary. But they do teach the Jewish Iraqi language.
Okay.
And
so it's documented somewhere.
It's documented though. The professor who teaches it, his name's Asaf Bar Moshe. He's also second generation. He was doing his linguistics, degree, and he wanted to do a PhD in Mandarin, I think, or Cantonese, one of the Chinese languages. I'm sure I should really know which one. And his tutor said, why are you doing that when you speak an endangered language in your house? Like, do that one. And so there's actually, last year, he published a textbook of it so people can actually learn it. But what was very moving for me was this course. I'd say about half of us were people like me.
Oh, so you went on the course?
I went on the course, yeah. It's on Zoom, but it's all run by Oxford University, which is incredible validation. It felt very, it felt wonderful, like, to be part of this. About half the people there, maybe 2/3, were Iraqi Jews, second, third generation, wanting to learn. But then they were also there were also people Arabic speakers from other parts of the Middle East who were not Jewish. There was a Korean woman, her accent's better than mine. And there was a woman from Ukraine. And I just thought, oh wow, this is a language anyone could learn. Like, I might decide to learn German over the hot summer. I could decide to learn this rare Jewish language.
Potentially, it could be revived.
Do you know there's 24 people or something on the course? I mean, I yes, potentially. I mean, I sort of never say never. I was very sort of fascinated by stories of languages being brought back from extinction, and endangerment. So that you can go and see there's a statue of supposedly the last Cornish speaker in Cornwall. Well, people are now speaking Cornish again, but the thing is they're in Cornwall still, and we're not in Iraq. And the Jewish community, we cannot go to Iraq. It's always been a crime to have any association or connection with the state of Israel. Most of the Jews went to Israel. So even if in your particular family, you might, as an Iraqi Jewish family, no one's been to Israel, you'll know someone, there's some connection. And, in my case, my father went there, and all of his side of the family are there. So,
I remember my sister, she had Iraqi Jewish neighbours. Actually, landlords and neighbours.
In Iraq?
No, here.
Oh,
Here, absolutely. And they were the most loveliest couple ever in Hammersmith. I recall them being in Hammersmith. Absolutely beautiful Iraqi Jewish family, elderly couple at the time, and their kids were beautiful as well. And they were just so nice, and it was just like, okay. And they spoke Iraqi.
Yeah.
And it was, there were certain words when they were speaking amongst themselves, which was Iraqi Jewish.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh, I understand. You're picking up the words that you're understanding, and it's just fascinating to have those discussions.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can understand each other, but I mean, I think people would code switch. They would go into, they would go into.
I think we do that when we start talking as well.
Yeah. we can't flow.
Yeah, we just switch between languages.
Of course.
And if I get angry, there's no way I can speak Arabic. I've noticed that recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like if I want to tell the kids off, I wouldn't know how to tell the kids off in Arabic.
Have you seen the Italians when they speak Italian and they get angry?
I'd love to be one of those. But
That's
I've noticed, if I'm upset or if I'm overwhelmed or if I'm in a situation
What about your parents?
What about my parents?
When they get overwhelmed and angry, what language do they speak?
They only speak Arabic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But even with my parents, if I want to convey something to them, if I want to discuss any topic with them, I can't do it in Arabic.
Interesting. When I get angry, depending on who I'm speaking to, I do actually get angry in Arabic, especially if I'm around Arabs. It's not because it's because I'm passionate about what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I will get angry about speaking, and I'll speak in Arabic. But obviously, if I'm in an English community and English work and everything, obviously I'll be in English. But again, my brain is trying to translate things of how I want to say it.
Yeah. I had something with my son where he was, banging this. I don't know what he was doing, making lots of noise. He was about 6 at the time. I don't know, a very noisy 6-year-old boy. So it was very noisy, and I just suddenly it came out of my mouth. Tash Machi, my head is exploding. I don't know if you use that.
And I read it in the book.
Anyway, and he looked at me, and I looked at him. And I was, and I said it so loudly, that he stopped doing whatever he was doing, and I said, it means my head is exploding. We had a laugh about it, but it was funny that was what brought it, what what made it come out.
I know. That's amazing.
Yeah,
because now you say that, right? I realize there's only one word I'd say to my kids when I'm angry at them in Arabic.
What?
Khalas.
Oh yeah, enough. Yeah.
Khalas.
Yeah.
And that's all I could say. The rest will be in English. But in Arabic, I would say khalas,
Khalas kafi, as in enough, or just khalas?
Khalas.
That's it.
Done.
And that's the thing, is it's your language.
Yeah.
With your kids.
Yeah.
If you say khalas in front of anybody else, they'll be like,
yeah.
okay? And it's just trying to understand it. There's this picture that you sent. Is it your...
This is my grandmother's grandfather, and he was Reuben Somech, and he was an MP in the Iraqi government in 20s or 30s, in the 20s, I think.
Wow.
But this shows how multicultural Iraq was.
Yeah, at that point, I mean, I think if you look at them, when I feel really sad when I read books by Iraqi Jews set in the 1920s. There was such optimism. And I'm talking about writers like Naim Katan. You know, he's writing about this time where people were, you know, everyone was hopeful about. I hate this idea that Iraq was never a viable country. It was a I think it was a viable. I'm happy to hear you guys say that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was a viable country, and in the 20s there were lots of people coming together to try and make it so. You know,
I've mentioned it a lot of times on this podcast. Iraq was one of the most multicultural societies going back to early civilizations.
Yeah, it was.
There was a lot of inclusion, but at the same time, don't get me wrong, there was the conquest, there was the religions, there was all of these things. I mean, you know, we don't want to get into that side of it, but it was very multicultural.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very free. It was very multicultural. I mean, I think it's very difficult for the Iraqi Jewish community to look back on that because, you know, what happened in the from 1941 with the Farhud, the pogrom of Iraqi Jews, which my grandmother lived through when she was 11, and then going on into, you know, and I think particularly for the community who stayed in the 60s, who really had a terrible time. You know, it's very difficult. But when you go back further, and even further than that, sorry, and about microphone. You know, it's exactly as you say, you know, and I like this picture of him because I like seeing that, you know,
and what is
he
that
looks very
called?
settled in. It's a
Sidara.
Sidara.
Sidara, well done, yes.
Yeah.
My granddad used to wear it.
Did he?
Yeah,
Well,
my dad.
Faisal brought them in to apparently to distinguish it from the tarbush because the tarbush was what was worn in the Ottomans, and he wanted to have something just Iraqi. Yeah, it's. I mean, you know, they would all have been in them. Our ancestors would all have been hanging out in those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember my granddad. I mean, he used to live like in the Kensington area, and then he used to always go down North End Road.
Oh yeah.
And then do his shopping down, you know, where the market stalls were.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
And then so he used to always wear that.
Nice.
That was his thing, and he used to walk down the whole street, and it was just, you know, my granddad was born in the early 90s, the 19s, you know, and then, you know, we were very blessed to have him still around in the 2000s.
Amazing.
And that was one of the things that he wanted to go home. And that was one of his main things. And, you know, God bless him, you know, God rest his soul. And he, you know, they went through all of these things, and they've experienced so many different generations of wars and things, and it was interesting. Yeah. But I also see that you've brought kuhla with you today.
Yes, I have. These are. I've got almost nothing from Iraq. My father left. Because he left in 51, they were only allowed to bring one suitcase each, and there was a list of what you were allowed to put in it, like one set of summer clothes, one set of winter clothes, you know. And people did hide things, you know. People sewed things into their clothes, and they hid things, and they did all sorts of things. But you know, I have nothing. We have nothing from that my father had from his childhood, which is really sad. He was 11 when he left. But my mother, because she left in 71, she went on a normal flight, you know, a normal commercial flight, and she could hack a suitcase. And she's let me have these, and they are her coal pots. And this is a little peacock and 2 trees. And I love them very much.
They are beautiful.
Yeah, I think they're lovely.
I remember my mum having her own kuhla pots from Iraq as well.
My mum, my sisters, my grandma. Yeah,
I think they're lovely. Yeah. And actually, funnily enough, I was looking on either the British Museum or the V&A, one of the museums, and I was looking for Iraqi artifacts, and I found one like this little tree one that was, you know, hundreds of years old, the same design. So it's a very old design. It was very cool to see it, you know, in their archive. So I think they've been made like this for a very long time.
Yeah. I'm sure they have.
I think I saw an Instagram post where you had also the gold talismans they give to babies.
Yes, the afsa. Yeah, so I have an afsa which is so it's 2 oak gall nuts, and they're wrapped in strands of gold, and then it has the khamsa hanging down with a blue stone, and actually, I was talking to some Iraqi Jews last night because I was saying, it's quite heavy. Who would like pin this to a baby? And they said, no, you put it on the cot, so it's to protect from the evil eye. And yeah, I didn't put it on my son. Maybe I should have done. It was, but I wear it as a necklace now. We put a thing on it. They're so beautiful.
Yeah, we used the Sabaiyun or.
But both of my boys got one each.
Did they?
When they were born.
Okay.
Yeah, and we used to hang it in the cots as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I love them. I think they're the most beautiful thing ever.
They're really
and the
beautiful.
Sabaiyun, the talisman, they're also is surrounded by gold.
Yes.
Yeah, they've got that as well. My boys got all
that's
of that
lovely.
stuff. You know, superstition.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite
Superstition in
superstitious.
Iraq,
I'm
right?
quite superstitious. But I think it's about love. You want to protect your child. I mean, as long as I think where it goes wrong is if you pass on the fear. And I think we probably all have like gone over that boundary in a way that we wish we hadn't occasionally. But if you are just trying to protect, I think there's something very lovely about it. We also carry salt. In fact, when this book comes out in America, it's going to be called Always Carry Salt because they thought the British title sounded like a cookbook. So we carry salt also to keep off the evil eye. And when I was very little, my mum would like push it into the hems of my clothes or whatever, a few grains of salt.
Gosh, salt is so versatile.
Yeah.
It's used for so many things. Like you throw salt, right?
Yeah.
Or you put it in your pocket, and if you've had salt with somebody, that makes you very close to that person. Like salt is used in so many different.
But then it's across multiple cultures as well.
Yeah.
Because I've had Lebanese people where it's just like it wards off the evil eye, and you've got to put salt in the corners of the property. Yeah, and then it's just sort of those little things, so you don't get that bad vibe within you.
Bad energy, or you put it in front of your door.
Yeah.
So just before people come into your house.
Yeah.
And that takes the negative energy out.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Salt is quite interesting.
I mean, it's I'm in two minds about how much of this my son's very interested in what he calls lucky charms, and how lucky is a lucky charm, and he always wants to know, and can I have? And he loves he when he was about 5, he invented a superhero called Evil Eye Guy, and he sort of drew him. It's a giant evil eye with little legs, little stick legs. It's quite funny.
Very creative.
It's like, and I did not. I was very much, I don't want to pass on the fear. I don't want him to be, anxious about this stuff. And some of my cousins have said, no, we've not passed on any of those anxieties to our kids at all. But he would sort of, he's gravitated towards the evil eye symbol and,
Do you have
himself.
the word hasad have you ever heard your mum say it? Lihizduk, or so they don't give you the evil, is it evil eye?
How do you say it? Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
You would to say it in Judeo-Arabic.
What, the evil eye?
Yeah.
Is the iron?
Ayan?
Yeah.
عين.
Sorry.
They يضربوك بالعين or something like that, as in they don't give you the eye.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Sorry.
Okay,
I
no,
don't
that's absolutely
know.
fine.
I wish
It's
my
just-
mum was here. She would be able to answer all these questions. I don't know.
No, I'm putting you on the spot. Just because it's interesting because it is an Iraqi thing quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think it's a Middle Eastern thing, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's across the whole Middle East, isn't it? But I mean, again, that's something that's shared. Yeah.
Samantha, apart from this amazing book, we know you were one of the writers on Paddington Bear 1 and 2.
I was in the writer's room. Yeah, I was.
How did this come about?
I was in the writer's room partly to provide a sort of perspective of, obviously it's all in the books by Michael Bond, and there was one writer-director really who did it all, Paul King, but he wanted other people's voices in the room, and particularly to look at the sort of refugee perspective.
Okay.
And obviously I haven't been through it myself, but I grew up around it, and so we really wanted to just to try to work on the stages of what that little bear would feel when he came to a new place and had to find a new home. I think it's aimed at little children, and but I think it does something useful for kids who don't have that in their family. I think
absolutely.
I mean, that's not the only point of the film, of course. It's supposed to be a fun film for kids, but
it's brilliant films, absolutely lovely.
I did feel there was something useful to be said there for little kids about, what it's like to come somewhere, not be wanted.
You've also written some, or written some other scripts or something.
I write plays as the other. Well, that's all I did for ages, and then I started writing books as well. And theatre is very difficult at the moment post-COVID. I think a lot of theatre kind of went down with the not able to do anything live. It was very tricky. So at the moment, I'm mainly concentrating on books. But it's How
many books are you writing?
No, right now I'm like. New ideas, just trying to play with new ideas. I haven't got the one yet. So, yeah, this one was quite a a difficult one to write for me.
Emotional.
Very emotional, yeah. Like I think I was very lucky to be able to interview my mother, my father, and my grandmother.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And it was amazing. Honestly, I would recommend this to anyone, especially if your parents come from a different place or your grandparents come from a different place, because, you hear all these stories. And it's not that I hadn't been listening. I listened to my family and I wanted to know the stories, but I had them in bits and pieces, in between this, in between that, family life. And I wanted to really know from beginning to end. My grandmother had been interviewed by a couple of archives, particularly about the Farhood and her story of surviving that. And she was actually helped during that pogrom, which was really horrific. Many, many Jews were killed, raped, homes looted, homes burned down. But she was helped by two families, Muslim neighbours in her own home, who said who warned them the mob is coming. Someone had betrayed them and said there's a Jewish house that way, and they warned them, and they left. And then while they were gone, they shot in the air to stop the looters coming into the house. So even their house was still there when they came back. Then they went to my grandmother's aunt's, and when they got there, and my grandmother's father was very ill. He had encephalitis. He could barely walk. So the neighbour said, come in. And they sheltered my grandmother, her two brothers, her parents, and a few other families. I mean, she's not even sure how many people were sheltered in this place. And apparently she said they did everything for her. They first of all, also they, again, shot in the air to stop them coming. Yeah. And my grandmother remembers them saying, everything for the sick man, everything for the... It was just a really beautiful memory. So she's been interviewed a lot of times. I'd heard these stories before, but... just being able to sit down and go, and then what happened? And wait a minute, who was it who did the yogurt? And who was it who looked after you? And who shot? Because also there were two people who shot in the air, and I mixed them up. I mean, it's a confusing story, when you're a child. And then to sit down with my mother and father as well. It was a really, it was very, very emotional, particularly with my mum. Because as I said, she was born in 1951, so and they didn't leave in the airlift. They felt that they would stay, that Iraq was their home, and they wanted to stay. And the 50s were mostly okay for the Jews in Iraq. Not as much. They weren't as much in contact with other communities as they had been in the 30s and 40s, in the 30s and the 20s and going back. There's a little bit more separation, a bit more anxiety, but. My mother didn't go to the Jewish school. She went to the American school. She was the only Jew in her class, so she's still friends with a lot of her school friends who are all over the world. Yeah, from all different communities, Muslim, Christian, they're all still in contact. A lot of them are still in contact. I
think I sent you a message saying one of my friends seems to think he knows your grandfather, who was the GP.
Yes. Oh, I couldn't pin that down, but I mean, I would love to.
Yeah, so it's because in Baghdad they were such a close knit community. Because I think you said your grandfather also had the only X-ray machine outside a hospital. He had a private X-ray
machine. So I guess other doctors were probably renting it, using it, borrowing it,
or referring people to him.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I think the doctors would all have been talking to each other. But my mum, the 60s were this was the real tough thing for me to write about. So after the 6 Day War in 1967, I think things got very difficult for the Jewish community, and they cut off all the phone lines in the Jewish homes. So if everyone felt very isolated and scared, that something's happened, you can't call someone, you can't get out, you can't do anything. And then in 1969, there was this, this show trial of supposedly Zionist spies. And one of them was my mother's cousin, who had actually been brought up a Muslim. His father was my grandfather's brother. And he was Jewish, and he'd married a Muslim woman. The families were not really, in contact, and they were living, I think, in Basra, and my mother's family were in Baghdad. And my mother was told, your cousin is going to be, is in the trial, and he's going to be hanged. And she didn't, she was very shocked at the time, and she was, I think, 18. She was young. And he was 17 only himself. He was almost certainly not a Zionist spy. He had been brought up a Muslim. I don't think any of those boys or men were Zionist spies. They lied, the government. They said they were 18 because you couldn't legally execute a 17-year-old. They'd all been tortured. There had been some confessions that were forced out of some of them. It was a horrific and a sort of sign of things to come, because Saddam was very much behind that, and then he turned on other communities afterwards.
Of course, yeah.
So, but the Jewish
minorities,
community was the first, and it was, so it wasn't the last, it was the beginning of it all, which I think is kind of, important for us all to remember, because it was everyone. It became everyone. Everyone was, I'm sure you have hundreds of stories from your own families afterwards.
I've got several people in my family that were executed by Saddam.
I've got a couple of uncles, and there are a lot of from my wife's family as well.
Yeah,
a lot as well. Just persecutions and tortures, and we've got a lot of stories there,
displacement,
and I think it was like the beginning.
That's why we ended up here.
Yeah, of course, that's why we're all here. So that was very difficult to talk about with my mother, and then they finally did try to escape. People would go north, and then the Kurds would smuggle them out into Iran, and then they would get from there to wherever they were going.
So talking about the Kurds, they were also massively persecuted.
Of course they were, yeah. And
I don't think Saddam or the Ba'ath Party left anyone, really.
No, they didn't.
They had one agenda, and one way of thinking.
Yeah.
And
if you did not conform, that's it.
No, of course, it was horrific. But I think it was interesting was that, in the 69, it's very early on. He's sort of the power behind the throne. He's not, and he's already beginning, anyway. But yes, so and then my mother, they were stopped at the last checkpoint, penultimate checkpoint, I think, and turned back, and they were in prison with over 100 other Jews who had also been trying to escape. And I found this very difficult to hear this. I grew up on stories of my mum was in prison. In fact, we even joke. They're all jailbirds in our family. We joked about it. But it's not. It's not. It was awful. And my grandfather,
I guess
as well,
documenting
really
that must have been very difficult.
How did you document? Did you record it? Did you
I
write down notes?
recorded with my mum, and I asked a lot of questions. And it was what was helpful for me was because it's my family. So how you forget you think, oh, I wish I'd asked that. I could then go back again and do it. So I went back more than once.
We actually spoke to the studio here. So what they do is they have family podcasts.
Oh wow!
So where you can come in as kids or siblings and interview your parents.
That's so interesting.
So and then that's recorded for you. It's nothing to do with that's a recording.
I just think everyone should do it. Because
absolutely, I think you were saying
as an adult, but like do it. We've all done school projects on our parents, like fine,
family tree.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But I think doing it again as an adult is, if you can find the time, is so, I found it so amazing to actually just to go, I've always been confused about this bit. What happens, and which happened before. What happened? I got
what
the sequence.
When?
Yes, exactly. The sequence was always wrong in my mind.
I've actually thought about it, bringing my parents, trying to do a podcast with them, just to sort of, it's for me, for our family archives,
and for your kids.
Nothing for the social media, but it's just to sort of go through it. I mean, I'm so gutted that my grandfather's passed away now, both of them. But imagine just sitting down. I mean, my granddad wrote a memoirs book.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
what an amazing thing.
Yeah,
to
so
have.
He lived from 1906, if I remember.
Wow.
All the way up to 2004.
And you have his memoir.
Yeah, we've got a book of his memoirs about how he went through his different stages of his life. And I was like, you know what? It would have been so lovely to create a podcast or just a conversational session.
Yeah, sure.
Something that you can easily hand over, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
The day and age of technology where, you know, because he wrote the book in Arabic. So it's like, okay, I need to make sure that my kids are able to read. And my father's like, this is your version of the book. You know, make sure you keep this within the family. And then it's just passing that on to the generations.
And something about hearing it in their actual voices is very important as well.
So
but also being able to ask questions. But also, I noticed, so, you know, sometimes the archive interviews of my grandmother, you know, some of the, I mean, it's great that they exist. But sometimes because they didn't know the family story or the history, she would jump from one subject to another and they would get confused. And so sometimes there were errors that sort of crept in, you know, and so a family member will go, hang on, you're not talking about this bit now, you're talking about that bit, is that right? You know, and can really make sure that you get it right. So I think it's, anyway, it was very moving and meaningful for me to do that. And you know, my son is 8, he's not reading the book right now, but I just think, you know, maybe in the future it will be meaningful for him. And some of my cousins are giving it to their kids now who are older. So there is this feeling that maybe it might be a useful result, although it's only about my family, but because, you know, we've all been through similar stories. So maybe it's a useful resource.
It's only about your family, but the amount of work and research that you've put into this book, it's so informative. It's really an amazing book, and it's going to be one that we recommend for everyone. Actually, I was thinking about writing a review for this book, but I was like, where do I start? Honestly, because it's been a while since I've been captivated by a book the way I have with your book.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice to hear.
And like I said to you earlier, it brought me, there was so many emotions. I went through a lot of emotion. And you know what? The generational trauma that is in this book, I resonate with that so much. And like I said to you earlier, if I would write a book, it would be very similar to this, you know?
I mean, I wanted something that other people could connect to, not just Iraqi. Obviously, it's more meaningful for me. So I can say this in our Iraqi space here. When Iraqis are connecting to it, it's very, very meaningful for me. But I wanted people, you know, a lot of families have generational trauma from other places, and I wanted people to be able to see their own stories in it and go on their own journeys. Actually, I think I think this about other episodes of your podcast that I've listened to, and also people from other communities that I've listened to or read their stories in other places. The more specific someone is, the more space it allows you to see. We all get told to try to be universal, but actually, we're all specific.
We're all individuals.
And it leaves more space, funnily enough, actually, to be specific. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something all Iraqi exiles and refugees are sharing, is the generational trauma. You know.
Absolutely.
We're coming up, unfortunately, to the end of the episode.
Can we just, before we come up to the end of the episode, how do you, like, as a family, keep the Iraqi tradition, the Iraqi Jewish tradition at home? What do you guys do?
I mean, we do all the sort of Jewish festivals with a very Iraqi flavour. So, for example, at Jewish New Year, I think it's only the Iraqi Jews who have a sort of, we have like 7 ritual foods that are all very specific about wishing for good things and an end of bad things. And it's, you know,
that's at the beginning of spring, right?
No, this is in the autumn, in the autumn of Jewish New Year. And I mean, you know, for example, pomegranate seeds wishing for good deeds because there are so many seeds in a pomegranate, that kind of thing. And you know, it takes 10 minutes and it's really wonderful. And I think it's only Iraqi Jews, or certainly only Middle Eastern Jews who do it. So we do all of that stuff, but with a very, you know, we're not particularly religious, but we do all the home stuff with a very sort of, you know, Iraqi flavour. We get together a lot, and my mum is a wonderful cook, and I'm very, very lucky, and she cooks a lot. So we do, I mean, I'd say we eat Iraqi food quite a lot. I cook a little bit of it, you know. I mean, you know what it's like with small kids when they just want their fish fingers
plain
and
pasta.
whatever. Yeah, plain pasta. So I do my best, you know, with my son as well. So there's that as well. I mean, we're not a very musical family, but we do listen to the music as well, particularly the older stuff, I think, that, you know, I've grown up with. And I find it really more emotion, like it tugs at me more emotionally than the 80s pop, which is my other favourite, I'm a terrible belly dancer, but I like doing it, I mean, we do it. Most everyone else.
So do you have big parties?
We have them, yeah. We have, and they call them hafla,
Hafla, yeah.
So, and they often have, Iraqi musicians. Sometimes Iraqi musicians will come and play. A lot of the older people have these gatherings. My grandmother used to go, and I mean, I remember my cousin being really shocked when she was in her 90s. My grandmother, she'd gone to one of these, and I can't remember which musicians had come over from where, and she was so excited. And she'd got in at 2 a.m. We'd said, really?
Your grandmother got in at 2 a.m.
in her 90s, because she'd been so excited by the Iraqi music. So I mean, there is the music as well. The stories, we're all very connected. So I mean, hopefully, I think that connection will go on,
Definitely.
But
I can see that.
They're the things you can't do and the things you can. But I think for me, in order not to feel disconnected, and in order to feel like I know where I'm going, I need to know where I come from. And that means trying, not necessarily succeeding, but trying to keep connected to what you can.
There's a lot of passion there, I think, honestly. So have you had a big hafla for your book?
We had a small book launch. It was very nice. More friends and family, and it was very nice. We wanted to play some Salima Murad music, but the bookshop said, we're a bit worried about the neighbours upstairs, so we didn't. We played some when we got home, so we did our best. It was nice, and hopefully there will be more chances to speak to other Iraqis about it as well.
Yes.
And I'm very happy to have come here. This is really important
so much,
to me
honestly.
that you guys asked me to do this.
Yeah.
No,
Really
thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
We normally do a question.
So our previous guest will ask our second guest, not knowing who they are, a question. One question. What would you ask?
Oh, what would I ask?
Do you remember the previous question?
I don't remember the previous one, but I remember the one before it, which we missed. So the one before it was, what would you write on your gravestone for people to remember you by?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know.
But the twist of it was as an Iraqi.
As an Iraqi. Wow. I don't know. My grandfather has on his gravestone, he had clean hands, which I think is lovely. The idea that you have clean, he was a doctor as well, of course, so obviously clean hands. But, the idea that you go through the world in that way is very beautiful. I don't know what I would... I don't know. I mean, I hope...
We'll let you to think about that. Have a think about that. But it's one of those fascinating things.
It's a really good question.
I remember hearing a girl read the poem of what is the dash between this date when you were born and the date that you passed away.
Yeah.
And what does that dash mean? That's your whole life. And I was like, oh, wow. If you think about it, born, died, and that little dash, that's your life in the middle.
Yeah. Mine will be a squiggly line.
All ups and downs.
It's reality.
It's reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's a really good question. I'm going to be thinking about that all the way home.
What question would you like to ask our next guest?
Oh, okay. Now I have to think of a good question. I would like... Oh, well, maybe we should ask the next guest, what is your favourite Arabic word? It can be in any of the many dialects and languages. That would be nice to know. I'd like to know. Or phrase, because the phrases are so good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
oh, that's a great question. That's a great question.
I'll look forward to listening, hearing the answer.
You never know which episode is coming out.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I was telling them, I think we need to start writing down these questions. We're starting to forget them now. It's just like we need to get into the role of this properly now.
Yeah.
But listen, for all our viewers at home, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Please like, share, and subscribe. It's so important for us to grow the platform with your support, and we really appreciate you watching this episode. Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you,
Naba.
Thank you.
And go out and buy Chopping Onions on My Heart.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha.
Take care.